Our podcast is about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about your new record as well.
Great. Sounds good.
Very cool. Well, first of all, why don't you tell us about where you grew up?
I am born and bred Long Island girl.
Okay.
So I was born in around Hop Hog, Long Island, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you can hopefully tell from my accent, because usually we all talk like this,
Yeah, I was gonna say you don't have an accent at all.
Yeah, but I got my coffee here.
Oh,
So
your coffee.
I don't normally talk like that. I have a bunch of friends who do, and as soon as I start talking to them, that's it. Like I go into the accent. But
Oh, that's hilarious.
funny because I know sometimes people have said, when you sing, you sound like you're English, because I say like dance instead of dance, and I'm like, well, you don't want me to sing in like my home accent, because it would be dance. Like it just doesn't translate properly. So
That's amazing that you could just like turn it on like out of nowhere. I mean,
but I
effortlessly.
I have a really bad habit of picking up on people's accents when I talk to them. It's terrible. Like if I talk to my brother and sister live in Charlotte, North Carolina now, and I go down there and all of a sudden I've got the little, that twang, and
Sure.
I go with Richie's family over in England, and all of a sudden, I don't know, I just pick up on it. It's just fun.
That's amazing. So grew up in Long Island. How did you get into music?
I always loved music. We had so much music around our house when I was growing up. My mom and dad every Sunday would be dancing to big band sounds in the kitchen when they made breakfast. It just always had like this really warm, wonderful connotation to it. Anytime I would think anything about music, my mom would be singing show tunes. And then when I hit the teenage angst years, of course, it was my great escape. It was just, I would just sit in a dark room, look out the window, put headphones on, and just stare out the window and just be taken away, this amazing escape, from all the stress and pressures of the life that I was, leading at the time. Those teenage years in high school were so rough.
Sure.
Right. And then
that middle school, I have a middle schooler, and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
It's the worst years of your life.
Yes, my daughter just started middle school, and I'm like, I can't even really say it gets easier,
Right, but that's where it starts. That's where the difficulty starts. Like I feel
right?
like
I know the drama. Do you have a boy or a girl?
a boy, two boys, one's 4, one's 12.
Oh my goodness, that's a stretch, right? Between the age difference.
Oh yeah, a little bit.
I've got that weird time of year right now where I have a 9 and a 10-year-old. And it sounds
nice.
Right. So it's totally insane. Like, what was I thinking back to back like that? But and my son he's the 9-year-old. She always says, I'm catching up to her. She's, she's right here now. She's 10 and I'm 9. And then of course she'll go to 11 in May, and he'll be like, oh, I was so close.
Right.
Brings ahead. But music has always been like this amazing, it was like my breath, like my religion. It was like, such a part of me. My school books, and I still have them, are covered with names of bands, with lyrics that aren't mine, but lyrics that I really related to, that kind of really, I just felt like resonated with my soul. Like these lyric lines got me, like they understood everything about me. And so I wanted to go into the music industry, to be around music. It was logical. So I started taking courses in audio recording at already out here. It's the Audio Recording Technological Institute out in Long Island. I was working, I was working at a radio station for a year and a half. I was interning there to see where I fit in and what slot would for me. Because if I could listen to music all day and be around it, that would be amazing. Maybe thought about working for a record company. I had my own college radio station, the Rock Candy Cafe. There was like all kinds of stuff that was going on. But I was going to school for communications, trying to figure out where I fit in. And it was during that time when I was working for or interning for the radio station where Deep Purple came to town. And the guys called up the radio station and asked if we would do a charity soccer match. And our DJs came, and they showed up on the field, and the Deep Purple guys, who basically was only Ritchie and Roger, I think, the rest of them didn't come. So Ritchie, now I know so well that Ritchie was so clever and loved soccer or football so much that he stacked his team with ringers. So
So
guys
they
from
would win.
oh, of course. Guys from Romania, like guys who like live and breathe soccer like for
Sure.
life from the second they grow up, like from the second they're born, they're like born with a ball in their hands.
Right.
Italian guys, like forget it. There was no way. And we had DJs who were good at pressing buttons and
Right. Of course.
really didn't. We did not do well at all. But that's how I really got into music was when I met Ritchie. We became friends. Our relationship grew very naturally. But when he took me on the road with him with Deep Purple in the last time that he toured with them, and then he reformed Rainbow, and I was always singing around the house. I was always like had journals written, just poetry or so when the Rainbow guys were having a hard time coming up with lyrics, he called me up and he said, look, I'm gonna basically fly in a professional lyric writer like tomorrow. Before I spend the money on doing that, do you want to give lyric writing a shot? I know, you're always like sitting on stuff like, you want to share any of it? Because I never like, share. It was like a closet poet. And so he played me the backing track of one of the songs that the Rainbow guys were working on. And as soon as I heard it, I came up with 14 verses. I got to Massachusetts where they were recording, and I handed them my little notebook and I said, what do you think? This is what I came up with. And the producer took one look, he circled 4 verses, circled 2 other ones, put them together as a chorus. And he was like, bam, done. We don't need the professional lyric writer. Cancel them.
Wow.
This, I like how to do, I was so excited. And then they wound up asking me to do 4 of the songs on the album. And since I was there, they asked me to do the backing vocals. So it kind of just threw me into it. But at the same time, it was like a natural progression. Like it wasn't that scary because I was with someone who I was sharing my life with. So I knew it would be okay, and I felt like I was in a very safe place. And I just loved the craft of lyric writing. And then while the other guys were doing their parts in the studio, like vocals or whatever, Richie and I would be sitting in this farmhouse where the studio was, watching the snow come down, nothing around for miles, sitting by a fireplace. And he would take out the acoustic guitar and he would just like come up with these songs. And the 2 of us would start writing songs together just for ourselves, not to have anything to do with, like the pressure of, you're on a schedule. You've got to clock in and clock into the studio and the record company's waiting for demos. It wasn't that. It was so freeing and just so beautifully creative in a pure moment. Those songs wound up being Shadow of the Moon, all the songs on Shadow of the Moon.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. So you almost formed the band. Yeah. Like as kind of the hobby, not a hobby, but just like an escape from the recording that Rainbow record.
Yeah, no stress, no pressure. That was the release from the pressure of the corporate world that I guess the record industry had become, because he'd been in it since the 60s, like so many bands at that point. When he was doing it, it was the 90s, and he'd been in it for decades already. And the record companies got to the point where they were like, all right, we need to hear a demo, or let me see the titles. We don't like this title. There's too many songs about this. Come up with another title. And he's like, I haven't made a demo since in like 30 years. It's like, what are they kidding me? Like he was frustrated, that they were taking such a corporate like stranglehold on his creative process. So this was just something that we just started doing for us, and because we love to do it. And only when we started playing the songs around parties at our house and our friends said, wow, you know what? We would buy that. If that was on an album, like we would buy that. And we went,
whoa.
Right, I guess other people might like it too. So we really lucked out. Just everything just came really naturally.
That's amazing. I want to rewind a little bit here because, well, I love the fact that you wanted to get into music and you found the in through radio, because that's what I did. Like, I mean, I could play guitar and I tried to play in bands and stuff, and I'm like, I know this isn't gonna be. I'm never gonna be, a rock star.
You never know what's going to happen.
So
I'd be singing, and look, 30 years later, look where I.
Yeah, there you go. And so, I mean, I did the radio thing. I did radio for 15 years, and like that was kind of what I loved to do. And I love that. But I wanted to ask you, you can play like an array of instruments. What was the first instrument you learned how to play?
First instrument was the piano. I was taking piano lessons as a kid. So I had a good basis with that. Having said that, I can kind of plunk my way through at this point too. I'm not like a virtuoso in any sort, any sense of the world, but when I write songs, especially for like my solo albums, I do that on piano and just
Oh,
like
okay.
everything seems to come out all at once. Funny story is Ritchie and I actually were in New Hope, Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and he picked up a penny whistle, and for some reason we just bought it and brought it home, and this thing sat on the kitchen counter for 6 months as I'm like cleaning and cleaning around it, and I'm like, oh my god, this thing, are we going to do anything with this thing, where is it going,
Right.
because nobody in the house played it was just me and him. And finally he said, you know what, I don't know, he goes, I'm not he's more into obviously the string instruments and stuff. So I said, well, let me just try something, and I picked it up, and every note made sense. Like, it just like all, like I started playing Renaissance Fair on it. I'm like, oh, I can do this. This is easy. Like it all just
Right.
made sense. But for him, he can't, like, it doesn't make sense to him, because it's more like this than like this. And that doesn't
Right.
make sense to me. Like that makes sense to me. So, but so the penny whistle was really the first woodwind that I started picking up.
Hmm.
And then as we went throughout the world and did all this touring, being so enamored by things of the Renaissance time and medieval times, we started picking up obscure instruments that, I mean, people here ask me, if I play an instrument when we get involved, like talking, even like my daughter's taking cello lessons, and I walked into the shop the other day with a music shirt on, and it had some of the shawms, like a picture of our logo, which is a shawm on there and a
Hmm.
guitar. And one of the girls was like, what is that instrument? She's like, do you play? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I play instruments. And she's like, well, and this is a typical conversation. Well, what do you play? And I'm like, I could tell you, but I know if it's not bass, guitar, or drums or keyboards, you're basically going to have that curtain come down,
Sure.
glaze over,
Or
go, oh, I'm
computer.
walk away. Right. Exactly. Like you're not going to ever have heard of it. So I will tell you, but we're not, that's it. I know we're not making a connection here. And I said shawms, Roush pipes, bombards. I went through crumb horns, Gems horns, like all the ones that I can play.
Hmm.
And I couldn't believe it. She lit up. She apparently sings madrigals. She brought over 3 of her friends. They had this coloring book of all olden instruments. I'm like, oh, I'm home. Like,
Whoa.
where have you been hiding? But that's so rare to even talk to people who know what those instruments are. So
Yeah, I didn't. I had to like. I'm reading the ones that you could play, and I'm like, I don't know. I know the recorder, I know the penny whistle, and then I'm like trying to figure out what these other ones are, and oh, okay, they're all wind instruments of some sort,
how to
and
pronounce them. It's like Rauschweig,
yeah,
silent P, because an R-A-U-C-H. It's like, it's such a strange thing,
right,
like a German title, and people don't want to even try to pronounce it. Forget about playing it. But
right.
those ones are like the double reed woodwind instruments. So
Mhm.
they're like the predecessor, like the cornemuse is the predecessor to it's like they call it the medieval oboe. Like that's a
Oh,
predecessor.
sure.
A lot of these instruments were used in the pageantry or the fanfare, or sometimes they would use them just to like scare the other people who were coming in to like wage war on their town. So when you started hearing like all these crazy shawms going off, like they'd be like, what is that? Like it's a monster.
Oh, wow, that's
Run away.
interesting.
Run away. But it's really cool because it gave our songs a dimension that we didn't have before I started. And I'm self-taught, so I'm sure anybody who really does these things, like bands like Pifero or New World Renaissance Band, or like
Mhm.
bands who are really living and breathing this, would look at me and say her fingering is all wrong, or
Oh,
something like
sure.
that. I'm just so happy to be able to add, what I can as far as those instruments are concerned, because it really gives another dimension to the songs that we're coming out with.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Just like I said, I had no idea that these instruments. I know they existed, but I didn't know what they were. Like till I started really reading, because I mean, I'm not sure if your kids had the same experience, but when my 12-year-old was I think he's like in 5th grade or 4th grade, they give him a recorder to learn how to play.
Wow.
So like
Probably not
that's
nowadays with the pandemic. You can't put your mouth. I don't know.
oh sure, who
I'm
knows?
guessing. I don't know. Everything's so crazy.
But they gave him a recorder, and then I had him, and then that must have been 4th, and then in 5th grade you get to actually, you can join the band, or you
Okay.
get like array of instruments, the violin and the trombone, and he picked the clarinet. It was similar to
Oh, nice.
the recorder, and I played the clarinet in 5th grade and gave up after that, but
There's a reed on the clarinet. Like
yeah,
there.
there is a reed. So I was trying to teach him that, and then he has a piano now. But I was fascinated by the instruments that you can play.
Yeah, well, as we were traveling, and we picked up these obscure instruments, and it could be like these really old, dusty shops in Prague, like down the cobblestone streets lit by lanterns. And then you go around a corner, and there's an old music shop, and you
That's
find one,
rad.
and you bring it home. You're like, oh, this is like the greatest find. And early music shop in England was another one in Bradford. You just find them every once in a while when you're probably not planning on it.
Sure.
But he used to basically just take them and hang them up on the wall. It's usually just like one piece of wood. So even the crafting of it is like really interesting, how they like get the sounds out of just like doing this one piece of wood. And they feel, they're so organic, the feel of them, because everything feels so plasticky now,
Right.
it's nice to feel like that good organic wood. But yeah, so he used to just keep them around the house, like on the walls. And I just remember one day going, these things were not born to be wall decor, like
Sure.
created, like they're dying to sing, like we have got to try this. So I took one down and I dusted it off, and I remember bringing it to one of the music shops out here, and they're like, we don't know.
You're like,
Like I'm not sure what to do with that. I'm like, so I guess you guys don't give lessons, like, do you know what reed would work in here? No. So I had to do my research. And I remember talking to Ritchie Canada, who's a good friend of ours. He's the saxophone player from Billy Joel's band. He did like
oh
all
wow.
the amazing sax. Yeah, he actually owns a studio out here on Long Island. And I said, what do you do about the reeds with the saxophone? Like, how do you like discover which reeds are working properly? He goes, I buy boxes of them. I throw half of them out because
Oh
like,
wow.
so at least I felt like I wasn't alone in that search, because reeds can be
Sure.
very temperamental and tricky. But so yeah, so it's all a learning process, and it seems to be working well, because there have been times where I've had to do, in a solo realm, working with the producer and with Ritchie, I've had to do, like a 14-piece ensemble and get all my instruments down. Some of them are as long as my leg, and really get
Whoa.
all the breath into it, and just do like these
Mm-hmm.
counterparts, and so full woodwind ensembles, and they're multi-track, so then it sounds like it's this gigantic sound, and it's
Sure.
just like me doing it.
That's so cool. That's so cool. What drew you to like the Renaissance music? Was that something you grew up with at all, or like what drew you to it?
Yeah, I never heard of Renaissance music before I met Ritchie. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I loved Renaissance fairs. I loved going to fairs. I love dressing up. I'm always one for just throwing up some, some costume or fairy wings with glitter. I think the world would be happier with glitter everywhere, one of those. But when I met Ritchie, ironically, all he listened to was Renaissance music, which is
Interesting.
right. When I first met him, I was thinking, as a matter of fact, the first day that I met him, I ran out the next day when they had record stores everywhere, dating myself, but back then. And I literally, because all I knew was the songs that I heard on the radio of his.
Mhm.
So I went out and I bought all of this vinyl to, all of these records, so I could kind of educate myself on these obscure tracks that I might not have heard of on the radio, so I could talk to him about it. But when I started talking to him, all he wanted to talk about was Renaissance music, history, paranormal, like spiritual realms,
Oh, cool.
like everything. It was so interesting and different. So when I moved into his house with him, all he'd be playing in this old Tudor house with a minstrels gallery is Renaissance music. And it was in the middle of in Reading, Connecticut. I lived up there with him for a year and a half before I dragged him back to Long Island. And kicking and screaming. No, I didn't. But so I remember at one point there was nothing around for miles, and the music was playing on the sound system, and it was this really there's this beautiful Renaissance music. And I looked out the window, and there were deer that were like just on the garden, and snow was falling down. And at that moment, I remember the moment, it was like the audio of what I was listening to and the visual just clicked. Like it was like living in a movie, like a soundtrack to what I was seeing. It wound up being like the soundtrack to nature, and I just felt it on a deeper emotional level. So then I could listen to the Renaissance music and walk through the woods and like have this whole like, oh, I'm in Game of Thrones or whatever
Sure.
hot these days, but it was back in 1989 through 91 around there.
Mhm.
And but it really felt like you were stepping back into another time period. And that's, I think, when I really started resonating with the music of that time and really got where his perception and the depth of the way that he was feeling the music came from. So we really
Mhm.
connected at that point, but I never heard it before him.
Interesting. Well, when you guys were putting together those first songs, like as the escape to the recording process, were they in like, did they sound like that Renaissance sound? Like, I feel like you'd have to add some of those other instruments to the mix to have it kind of give it more of that like Renaissance feel.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, the first songs that we started playing, one of the songs that we wrote was called Shadow of the Moon, and it was based on a song by Moon. It was called Moonlight Shadow by Michael Oldfield, who had Maggie Riley singing at the time.
Oh, I love him.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, I only know him because a friend of mine, he sings on one of his records.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
his name is Luke Spiller. He's in a band called The Struts, and I forgot what album it's called, but he's like, because he always has a different vocalist per record, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so he's on one of the albums.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, exactly. Because it's so
Yeah.
nice to talk to someone who knows. Because I feel like you can go overseas and there's so so much more free. I mean, when you turn on a radio station over there, you'll get a folk song next to like, sort of like the way our band is, a folk song next to a rock song, next to an instrumental, next, like, I feel like their radio stations don't really have as many boundaries as we do here with our
Mhm.
specific
Sure,
genres.
genre. Yeah,
When you fit
exactly.
in that box, if you do not fit in that box, you are not accepted.
Sure, sure.
So, but that's how I first started learning about Maggie Riley specifically as his vocalist. Then Ritchie introduced me to Moonlight Shadow, songs like Back to France, 5 Miles Out. Just, oh my God, just blew my mind. I had never heard them here on the radio stations
Mhm.
I was listening to. So, but it was great to like expand. Nowadays, you could put on YouTube and you're able to find a lot more stuff. But,
Sure.
but back in the day, it was like whatever was on the radio, and that was pretty much it that you got exposed to. It was hard to find new artists to be inspired by. So originally, Moonlight Shadow was a song that inspired our song Shadow of the Moon. So it was very acoustic based, but very sort of ethereal, kind of like magical, mystical. So that wasn't so much into the Renaissance kind of sound,
Mhm.
although we love the Renaissance sound. We're kind of like a mixture of a lot of different varieties of music. So I think the only songs that really had that big Renaissance sound on our first album was probably The Clock Ticks On and maybe Renaissance Fair towards the end, I guess, which was an ode to going to the Renaissance fairs. The Clock Ticks On, we actually would hire people. We would hire trumpeters or trombonists or like try to flesh it out with even like sound files that our producer would do. He would like actually purchase like sound files, so like that would sound exactly like medieval and Renaissance times. So it
Oh,
was a
okay.
mixture of, but we didn't play any of those instruments at that time. We had to like hire people to come in to like play some of those parts and then flesh it
Mhm.
out with synthesizer.
Oh, okay. When did you guys decide to, make this a band? Like, obviously you guys were, doing it as kind of an escape again. And then when you're talking about showing it to some friends and they're like, I would buy this. At what time were you like, let's, do this and form a band and put a record out and tour and really, make this
Yeah.
a thing?
Which was a huge, gigantic step because, of course, Ritchie coming from all of the big rock stuff.
Rock world, sure.
I had never been in a band, in my life, except
Hmm.
for like singing backups for the stuff that he had done with Purple and then with Rainbow.
Yeah. And then now you're the front, the front person to the band, right?
Slightly terrifying, slightly. I
I
gotta
can't
say,
imagine.
I kept thinking, so I'm going to wake up at any point now. This is not happening. you know, but because honestly, my first audience of singing in front of like on stage was in Japan, in front of 5,000 people. That was
Wow.
that was like, here you go. It was like jumping into the deep end of a pool. Like you see,
Right.
you swim like that. You're not a choice, you know?
Right.
And I swear I held onto that mic stand for the first half, like of the whole entire show, just like shaking and like hoping, oh my God. Yeah, I was so nervous, just hoping I didn't faint or fall over.
Right.
I was
Wow.
so freaked out. But you know, like, but that's to be expected. It just kind of grew from there, you know.
Mhm.
I think that when Ritchie and I decided, well, we actually, when Ritchie delivered the Rainbow songs to the Japanese record company, it was BMG Japan at that point.
Mhm.
They had heard that we were just sitting around and playing songs of our own. And they were really the first record company to believe in us. And they said, if you have other stuff that you'd like to put out, we would, you know, we'll back you. We'd love to do that. They said the only caveat, the only thing that we would like to do is we want to make sure that when you put it out, we want you to put your name on it, because they wanted people to know that it
Oh,
was
sure. Ritchie's band.
affiliated.
Yeah.
And otherwise people would just hear it and not have any idea that he was, you know, he was involved with it. And he is such a big name in Japan still to this day. He was huge.
Well, yeah, everywhere he is.
Right. So yeah, so that's what happened. He basically, you know, we worked it out with the Japanese record label, and then once they carried it in Japan and it was doing well, we got a gold record immediately from it. It was charting. It was
That's
such
crazy.
it was crazy because it was so different, you know, like nobody really knew, like we said, how to categorize it, how to classify it. Half the people thought he was going crazy because he just literally went from purple, you know, and
Right.
to like, what? He's Renaissance? What? Has he lost his mind? You know, and he was just finding this, he loves to be challenged. So he was like, this is new music. This, how do I do this? Wait, let me, new tuning on it. And it like inspired this whole new creative spark in him, which he hadn't had in the rock world for a while, because he felt like, okay, I have to come up with a riff again. Okay, I have to, like, you know, I've been doing this for a while. How many new riffs can I come up with? So I think at that point, he probably just needed a change and less pressure. But so, yeah, we put it out in Japan. And then once it was released in Japan, it spread over to Germany, and a record label contacted us and said, hey, we just heard you were doing really well in Japan. What do you think about us putting it out? And bam, it went over there. We were with Edel in Germany, and then it just spread from there. And we wound up like, again, the gold records and the charting, and it was amazing. We did a whole press tour over there, and it blew my mind, because for this to be your, you know, your first album, like your introduction to the musical world was a little bit overwhelming. So just incredible. But people have been, I feel like people either kind of jumped off at that point because they either thought, some people didn't even like listen because they thought, oh, it's a Renaissance project, I'm not getting involved with it. Some people heard it and like fell in love with it, and then told two people. And I don't know if you remember, you're probably too young for that commercial. It's like, and then told two friends, and then
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It really spread kind of like a grassroots kind of thing, which we later found out was your most loyal fan base, because they're not sort of brainwashed by what you hear again and again and again on a radio that's trendy and fashionable, and then
Right, the one hit that they've just recognized, like, oh, okay, that's so and so.
played so much, right?
Right.
And on to the next thing, and then that's played a million times, and so it's in your head, and you think that you're in love with it, even though it's really just repetition. And that, how could you not know it after you've heard it 1,000 times?
Sure.
But our people kind of are really like, I would say they're the independent thinkers who kind of, they're like braving their own path. Like they're not told what to follow or what to listen to or what to wear or who to be or who to look up to. You know, like Oprah could tell them to read a book, and they're going to be like, well, why is your opinion more important than mine? You know, like
right.
For them, and they should like kind of stand up and say, hey, you know what, let's find our own path. Let's kind of listen to all these different influences and make my own decision on things. So those wind up being our strongest fan base, the people that are these loyal grassroots followers that kind of just will buy our album for Christmas for someone, and then they pass the music on or just suggest it to someone. And before you know it, we've got just this amazing group of fans with a very similar mindset. So for us, when we look out to the audience or we talk to them after the show, it's not like talking to strangers. It's like talking to friends that we haven't yet met, that now we're like all connected to through music. And the fans connect through the music too. They actually wind up getting married to other people in the audience, meeting other people, having friendships, like fast friends, and they've met like years ago, and they've been together, and they catch up every year like a family reunion whenever we tour, because they know that they're so connected through the music, and they have just a very similar way of kind of braving their own path through the forest, and it's just amazing all through the music.
That is amazing. With talking about touring, was it hard to be booked on tour? Like how were you guys booked as far as like being just like a totally different, style of bands? I'm sure there's not a whole lot of, and maybe there are, and I just don't know about it. A whole lot of bands that kind of have the similar sound. You know how like on a bill they'll try to kind of book everybody in this box of similar artists. Like, yeah, how did that work for you guys?
We don't really fit in like that. So we tended not to do festivals where we would be put on with a group of other people, because we knew that like our fan base would probably be different than the fan bases that were coming for the other specific artists, like where we had to kind of fit us in. And plus, with a lot of the festivals, it's just a sea of faces. I mean, it's just, there's so many people that go to festivals.
Right.
And for us, we always find that it's easier or better to connect with people in a more intimate setting, a more intimate environment. So we try to we cap the capacity of the shows. So like overseas, we won't play to like more than 2,000 people. And even that's kind of stretching it. We'll say, let's just cut that at sold out. We'd rather play 2 nights in one place so everybody can get in, or 3 nights in one place, than just have the promoters go crazy and just open up the fields and have like way too many people.
Right.
Because for us, I want to be able to say, okay, well, what do you guys want to hear? What do you want? You want to come up and play? Like you want to sing with us? You want like,
oh, wow, that's amazing.
Oh yeah. It's like being at a party at our house, which is, it's just so much fun. We literally like get down. Richie will hand out beers to the audience. He's like putting his guitar out there, letting people play it and strum it. We really just, at the end of the show, we'll pull people up on stage. We're all dancing like, round and round, arm in arm together. And it's just really becomes like you're at a party at our house, and you can't really do that with 10,000 people.
Sure. Or at all anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, forget it. I don't even think we'll ever, I hope we'll see those audiences again. I'm going to just keep my fingers crossed, knock on wood, hope that all returns to normal at some point. So
they're saying, I mean, I've heard fall of this year that they're going to start opening up shows, but we'll see. Again, fingers crossed and knock on wood, right?
I'm keeping everything, fingers, toes, crossing, whatever I need to do. Just like everybody else, all of our shows were canceled, they were put off. So now, all the artists are now trying to get any time slot that they can. So everybody's pushed way back, trying to fit into any venue. All the promoters, and the agents are trying to get everybody in. And we did a couple of those live streams, which were amazing, because people could write in and we could take the requests that way, and we could talk to people that way. And it was really like literally being in our house, because you could see, like you're basically like seeing our house. And
which is cool, I'm sure, for a lot of fans. So like behind the curtain, like, whoa, that's where Candice and Ritchie live. How crazy. Like,
welcome to Minstrel Hall. And we could joke around, like we're always joking around with each other anyway. But but talking through a screen is nowhere near like having that live experience, that energy.
Sure.
So you can't. I realize it's like, it's a kind of a Band-Aid for the fix at this point, but it's really going to be so good just to get back to that live energy of audiences again.
Yeah, definitely. Well, speaking of that, everything being shut down, like this new record that you guys are going to put out, is that something that was done and recorded post, pandemic, or were you guys working on it before that started? Or tell me where you guys were at when, the world kind of came to a halt.
World stopped. Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny, because we used to say, people would say, oh, do you guys, you like the Renaissance or the medieval times, right? And we're like, well, I think the best thing about living in this time period is looking back to the other time periods and seeing what you connect with the most and kind of weaving it into your life today. Some people feel a connection with, the 60s, with the 20s, go back, hundreds or thousands of years or whatever. But it was funny, because for us, we used to say, well, we like the Renaissance time, but we also like sanitary conditions. We like running water and plumbing. We like heating and air conditioning. Exactly. And we definitely like not having the plague. And then
then it hits. Yeah, right.
Thank you so much. So we can't really say we don't have the plague anymore, because it's literally everywhere. having said that, I completely lost train as to what was the question.
Oh, I was wondering like where you guys were at when the plague hit again, and
Exactly.
how that affected this new record.
That's what made me like go off on the plague direction. Um, so yeah, we actually had the album recorded. We recorded it in 2019.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was ready to go. And then we had, we're talking to our record label at the time. It was slated for a late May, early June release. And sure enough, everything shut down in March. So everything was put on hold. They didn't know, people just, they weren't distributing, they weren't pressing records, nothing was available, nothing could be available, everything was closed down and shut down. So we were on hold just like everybody else. But it actually wound up working out for us because when that happened and we stopped everything, we had recorded, I guess it was 5 Christmas songs and a bunch of other songs that the other songs wound up being Nature's Light, but we were going to hold off on those 5 Christmas songs until we went back into the studio at a later date and put out, recorded more Christmas songs for a full holiday album to be released this year.
Oh, okay. Because you have a previous holiday record.
We do. We have Winter Carols. We did a re-release in 2017 with a bunch of new tracks and videos. And so it's a double CD. But when this whole thing hit, we were like, you know what, now we can't put out Nature's Light, in 2020. We couldn't put it out in May or June like it was supposed to. And we had these Christmas songs and we were like, it just doesn't feel right to hold on to these songs. If we have them, fans are like dying for new music. They need some kind of inspiration. And especially since the holiday time was going to be hard, you can't have your big groups of friends and family, like everything had to be scaled way down. It was so different than any other year. So we actually wound up putting out those songs, the Christmas songs, as an EP, just so people could have them. And they were just so grateful about that. So yeah, that was like our little Christmas gift to people. We're like, we know it's not the full album, but here's for you guys to get you through the Christmas time. And it wound up perfect. We wound up actually rediscovering and reconnecting with our original record label, which was Edel. And they've just done an amazing job promotion wise and distribution wise and press and the albums, like putting everything together with the artwork and lyrical videos. And we've got a bunch of new videos that we just shot an EPK for, and proper music videos as well.
Oh, cool.
In production work, so that's going to be coming out soon. So yeah, now everything is working exactly the way it's supposed to. So I guess there was a reason things happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just watched the lyric video for Nature's Light. I love it. It's awesome.
Good, yeah. There's the lyric video, then there's the regular video, which actually won a couple of awards at the Colorado Film Festival.
Oh, amazing. I'll have to see that one. I just watched the lyric video of
no, this is very cool. You'll like it.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Go to we have an official YouTube site, or you can just go to like blackmoresnight.com or CandiceNight.com, and everything is kind of like linked right on there. So it'll bring you right.
Rad. Awesome. I'm looking at the track listing for the new record, and is Wish You Were Here, is that the Pink Floyd cover?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's very,
I was like,
well, we originally recorded Wish You Were Here. It's by the Rednecks, which is a Scandinavian band.
Okay.
And I feel like the only thing that people know of the Rednecks here is Cotton Eye Joe. Do you know Cotton Eye Joe?
Oh, yeah.
Right, which has nothing to do with this song. It's like you couldn't get more polar opposite than these two songs.
Sure.
But when we first went on tour in '97, like I was saying, you could turn on the radio there and hear all of these different artists that I wouldn't hear over here. Wish You Were Here by the Rednecks was on the radio, and it stayed at #1 for like 17 weeks.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Huge in Germany, huge. And we were like, what a great song. And we brought it home. We recorded it on Shadow of the Moon originally, but it's actually one of our most requested songs by the fans. Like whenever we ask them what they want to hear, that song comes up almost like consistently as one of the songs they always want to hear.
Okay.
So we thought, you know what, now it's 24 years in, to us performing the song on stage, playing the song, getting more used to the song. My voice has grown since the early days, 24 years ago. So this, I think, is a truer representation as to how we do it on stage now. We replaced the vocal, we added some new instrumentation, new backing vocals. So it has like a bit of a, of a 2021 or 2020 or 2021 feel to it. So it's more like you'd hear it on stage if Blackmore's Night played it now, as opposed to how it was originally. So
okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure because I didn't know if it was the song that you had previously released, or since it said 2021, I was like, oh, maybe they just did a cover of the Pink Floyd song. Like, that's kind of an interesting choice for the band, but hey.
We have chosen Stranger Things. Like, you know, we did, I mean, things that people probably would have thought, like who would have thought we would have done Sonny and Cher, I Got You, Babe.
Right.
You know,
That's
like
true.
that was an interesting choice. Or Lady in Black by Uriah Heep. Great song, loved it. You know, so we like every once in a while we choose these covers where people are like, really? And then we put our little spin to it, and it becomes a whole different Blackmore's Night song, I guess.
That's amazing. Well, Candice, thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Of course. I have one more question for you. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Wow, yeah, that's always a tricky one because the industry is so different. I have to go with just sticking true to yourself. Like, you know, I feel like there's so many copycats out there and so many people following what they think is in and cool now, and they kind of jump on that and really try to you know, like cash in on what other people are doing. But it's always the people who are different that really wind up kind of getting the attention, whether it's from the major labels or not. Eventually it winds up becoming the shining star that, you know, that you are, because nobody does you better than you know. So like, you can listen to everybody, take a little bit from everybody, but just don't try to become anybody else, you know. Like really just make it your own. And I feel like once you do that, you wind up having your own fan base, and once that world opens, it can take you any place. I never thought I would be here now, and look what happens. So anything is possible in this world. So just don't give up, keep believing in it, but mostly believe in yourself. That's the most important thing.